Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Always a joy to have with us Dr. Joel Klein. He's with Ventana Wellness, and we're here to talk about something I think we all suffer from once in a while, some more than others, and that is acid reflux. And all right, before we get into Dr. Klein, here's one for you. Mr. Chestnut, who's kind of like Joey Chestnut, you ever heard of him?
No.
He's the world's hot dog eater.
Oh, okay, right.
World's fastest hot dog eater.
How those guys.
Okay,
it's
well,
amazing.
guess what? He got another record over the weekend. He ate 9.3 pounds of turkey meat off the bone in 10 minutes. Now, I would imagine he's dealing with reflux if he didn't fall asleep because of tryptophan.
Who knows what kind of, he may be on a very scientific training regimen of stretching his stomach. I don't know how these guys.
Wow.
And then you have these little skinny guys who win the Nathan's hot dog, Coney Island, whatever thing. Yeah, there's this little skinny guy doing it. I don't know how they do it.
Okay, it must be a mind over matter thing.
Something like that.
All right, well, I think at one time we all suffer with it, and over-the-counter remedies is off the shelf with this kind of stuff.
Well, this is the thing. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I remember back when I was even a resident, when Tagamet first came out as a drug, it was the first ulcer drug. It became the #1 selling drug in the country. It surpassed Valium, really? Our #1 prescribed drug in the country. This was like the early 80s. So obviously this is a big issue, but it's not being caused by what people think it's being caused by.
So what is reflux?
Well, reflux, to define it, reflux just means moving back in the opposite direction. Okay. So it's the stomach contents and stomach acid moving from the stomach back up into the esophagus is technically what it is. Now, what it's being caused by is a whole nother issue.
All right.
Because the big surprise is that, I'll tell you what it's not being caused by. For the most part, it is not being caused by too much stomach acid. The medical literature shows. I laugh
because that's what it'll all be promoted.
Of course, and we're all taking acid blockers, but that's the point. That's why I'm here, to try to educate people into what's really going on. The medical literature shows that people with reflux don't make any more acid than people who don't have reflux.
Wow. Wow, what a statement.
So what is going on?
Yeah.
What's really going on, actually, believe it or not, in some people, this sounds completely paradoxical, it's too little acid. Most people have too little acid, not too much. Now, in some people, in people who are taking the acid blockers and they don't help, they already have too little acid. And actually, there are supplements, something called betaine hydrochloride that you can get with digestive supplements, or people will use apple cider vinegar to help things actually get better. I've seen that happen. More often, what is happening is that the stomach itself has become irritated, and even the mucus lining that protects the stomach from its own acid has been eroded away by stress, diet, drugs, antibiotics, I think bacterial overgrowth. So what you have is this weird situation where you don't have enough mucus to protect your stomach from your own acid. And a lot of times you still don't have enough acid to really digest your food. So what happens is even a little bit of acid feels like too much because your stomach doesn't have the protection. And that's where all these acid blocking medicines work.
All right. Okay, so what relief are they getting if they aren't really addressing the problem?
The same relief that if you're trying to treat the oil indicator on your dashboard, if you inactivate the sensor, you get relief from the sensor activating.
Oh, okay.
But it's still not putting oil in the car.
Okay.
So I'm saying if your stomach is in this condition where even a little bit of acid, you may not be enough to digest your food, and people can tell that. If you get indigestion immediately after eating, especially with higher protein, things like red meat and all that, that is almost always a situation of too little acid. But if you don't have any protection in your stomach left over to protect yourself from even that little bit of acid, again, it will feel like too much. So suppressing it helps the heartburn symptoms. It will not help your digestion, even though people will notice their digestion is worse, even though their heartburn is better.
Okay. So are there times that it is too much acid?
There are times,
okay.
Mostly in younger people. If you're over 50, it's pretty much, very unlikely it's too much acid. Younger people, high stress, it can be. too much. And usually too much is going to be pretty much a stress-related type of phenomenon. But for most people who are on these drugs, you know, it's not the case. And what we do is when I actually work on healing the stomach lining, which is not done with drugs, it's done with diet and naturopathic supplements, then I actually get people off their acid blockers.
Wow. Okay. This opens up a lot. All right. So if you're not producing enough acid, and yet people, I know a lot of people who just can't enjoy a meal.
Right. Right.
I mean,
so what happens is you don't tolerate even a little bit of acid because the mucus lining, the stomach has become irritable. Now there are a couple of reasons for that. So the first job is to heal the stomach lining. Now, first off, allergenic foods. We go back to our friend gluten as being a big one on the list. Some people corn, but sometimes food allergies can be a big problem with this. Certainly just processed foods themselves. When they looked at diets that help reflux, it was, surprise, the low carb, lower carbohydrate diet that seemed to help reflux. So the diet issue and getting away from the processed foods, the flours, the sugars, and these types of things. Then we use naturopathic supplements. One of my favorites simply to use is something called DGL, which stands for deglycyrrhizated licorice. It's licorice root that's been treated to remove the one of the compounds in licorice root that can elevate your blood pressure. And using this in fairly high doses for several months can help heal the stomach lining. And I will do that, get people on the right diet, then see if we can wean them off their medicines. You can't just stop the medicines because that's the problem. You've dug yourself a deep hole. We have to try to heal the stomach lining first and then see if you can be weaned off the medicine.
Is there a difference between reflux and heartburn?
No, well, the heartburn is the symptom. So heartburn just means you're having, frequent, you're having burning in the esophagus is spasming. Reflux is the cause of the heartburn. So reflux is the diagnosis. Now, if you're having reflux is usually, used when they call GERD or gastroesophageal reflux disease. It's people with very frequent heartburn, nightly heartburn, like when they lie down, or having very frequent attacks of that. And it is something that you can't ignore because in some people, that frequent acid in the esophagus will burn the esophagus lining and over time cause chronic changes, something called a Barrett's esophagus, that is precancerous. So it's not something that can be ignored and people just keep taking Tums over and over and over again because number one, the acid is burning in their esophagus already by the time they reach for the Tums. And I've had a couple of patients over the years overdose on Tums to the point where one gave himself kidney stones because all the calcium then crystallized in his urine. These are both young guys who didn't know any better. The other one actually had to admit to the hospital in kidney failure. Because his kidneys were completely clogged up by the calcium crystals. And all we had to do this was back in the day before the stronger drugs, put him on some Zantac and flushed his system out with IVs and he was fine. But they were eating 15 to 17 Tums a day. And go, well, I thought calcium was supposed to be good for you. Okay. I said, well, yeah, and water's good for you too, but too much of it and you'll drown.
All right, we're talking about acid reflux or not enough acid, but basically reflux, heartburn. I want to ask him about where the gallbladder and the pancreas play into this.
Okay.
And if you want to join us, you can. The number to the studio is 541, forgot the number, the other, forgot the... 776-5770. I'm sorry, I had a blank there because we have a new number now that comes to the studio. 776-5770. That's the number if you have a question for Dr. Klein. We'll be right back. Jeez.
Hi, I'm Paulina and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back with Dr. Joel Klein from Ventana Wellness. By the way, ventanawellness.com is the website, and of course it's a wonderful clinic right here in the Medford area. And if you're looking for a good doctor, here's one right there, Dr. Joel Klein. We're talking about reflux. All right, we're going to the break. You explained the difference that heartburn basically is a result of the reflux.
Right.
Where does the gallbladder and the pancreas play into this problem?
A whole bunch of different places. The gallbladder, number one, gallbladder symptoms can feel like reflux. So people can get spasm in the gallbladder and it'll feel, for some people, sometimes it's right under the rib cage, and some people it's in the middle here and they can think it's reflux. Doctors have done this over for decades, Jonathan Wright, particularly up in the Seattle area, who found that there seems to be this association of people with low stomach acid and gallbladder disease. Now, whether this is, again, people being more prone to food allergies, other issues, but a lot of times the gallbladder disease can be a result of the long-term low acid. Pancreatitis is a different, usually pancreatitis comes from the gallbladder disease, unless it, alcoholism is probably the most common cause of pancreatitis, but the other common cause is people with gallstones from the gallbladder disease will flick little stones down into the duct that
the two share.
The two share, yeah. Right. The pancreas and the liver both empty into the same little area there, the same duct. And if a stone gets in there and clogs it, not only will it clog up the liver, it'll clog up the pancreas.
All right. Let's take a few calls, and then I've got a bunch of questions here. But hi, Steve. You want to know how to stop taking antacids?
Yeah. Hi, Perry. I have the problem that he was describing before the break. My father had this acid problem and ate Tums like candy his whole life, and he died from cancer of the esophagus.
Uh-huh.
So when I was in my 50s, I had my first colonoscopy. They checked my esophagus at the same time, scoped it, and mine was very inflamed and irritated. So I went on Prilosec.
Right.
I mean, it didn't matter what I ate.
Right.
I had to eat Tums or something, just like my father was. And the doctor said, well, we're a little more worried about the cancer than we are of what the Prilosec's doing to you. So,
well, yeah, in his case, he's right, especially if you have the inflamed esophagus. So that would be something, you would need, like I said, I will have to work with people individually on that because it takes a very intensive program of healing your stomach and healing the lining to see if you can be weaned off the Prilosec at a future date. Right now, you're right. You kind of need it to protect you. You're in danger without it.
Right.
But it is not healing the source of the problem. Yeah. It's protecting you from the consequences of the problem. So you would need, like I say, we do naturopathic remedies, dietary issues. It's a little bit more, it's a fairly aggressive program with people. Obviously, caffeine, all these other things that aggravate it, to then do that for several months to then see if somebody can be slowly weaned off the Prilosec. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just something I can tell you, oh, do this and you'll be fine. No, you got a potentially serious problem and it would take aggressive management. Yeah. But it can be done. I've done it more than a few times.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Steve. All right, 776-5770 is the number to the studio here if you want to talk to Dr. Klein about reflux. Marlene, hi, what's your question today? Marlene?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Klein. My name's Marlene. You know me. I'm a patient of yours.
Okay.
I've been taking Nexium.
Right.
And the pharmaceutical company stopped paying for it.
Right. Well, the insurance company stopped paying for it because it's too expensive.
I'm taking Dexlent.
Right.
And it's not working.
Right, because your problem is probably...
I was up at 4:30 in the morning.
Right. All right, so that's something, I don't know if you and I have dealt with this, but you and I need to come up...
No, we haven't been able to deal with this
matter
yet.
Well, then you need to schedule an appointment and we need to deal with it because too much acid is not your problem. That's why the medicine is not working. We need to work on your diet and healing your stomach so that you can then tolerate acid, which actually will be more likely to help the problem.
There you go. All right. Make an appointment. Thanks, Marlene. Yep. Where does caffeine come into this?
It's an aggravator.
Is it?
It's just one more, just pouring more gas on the fire that if you're trying to heal the problem, you're just making it worse with the caffeine. It's a stimulant in there and it will worsen both the acid and I'm not sure of this, but I think it also helps to even open up the sphincter to make it easier for acid to get in there. By the way, that's another point I want to make. Everybody's told, well, I have a hiatal hernia. 40% of people walking on the street have a hiatal hernia. That's not the cause of the problem. It makes it easier to reflux. A hiatal hernia is when part of the stomach actually goes up into the chest wall through the diaphragm. And in the chest, there's negative pressure to keep your lungs expanded, so it allows the acid to get through easier. But it is not the cause of the problem. Not everybody with a hiatal hernia refluxes. So the thing is, people say, well, I'm doomed. I have a hiatal hernia. What can I do? It says the hernia is not the cause of the problem. It just makes it easier for you to be symptomatic from the problem.
All right. Hiccup and burping is all part of it?
Well, the burping is a lot of times food not being digested in the stomach because of not enough acid. So it putrefies in there, makes gas, and then the belching is going to come up. Hiccups are irritation of the diaphragm from any number of different things that can happen in the stomach. That's just a nervous irritation.
What is GERD?
Gastroesophageal reflux disease. It's just what we're talking about. It's more severe. It's not just occasional heartburn. It's recurrent reflux of acid from the stomach, gastro, into the esophagus.
Do infants get this problem, have this problem?
Well, infants have reflux problems because they have immature sphincters in the esophagus and these things. However, again, progressive and naturally oriented doctors have found a lot of infant reflux is due to food allergy. And since a lot of them are being fed cow's milk-based formula, that there are a lot of times, they may be allergic to the cow's milk protein in the formula.
A lot of babies spit up and do all that.
Yeah, normal spit up that's normal because the sphincter is not mature and all that. But ones who are having a more severe problem and to the point where they're aspirating it, giving them asthma and lung problems, yeah, that's a more severe problem.
All right, some foods to avoid.
If it hurts when you eat that, don't eat that.
Well, so if it tastes good, spit it out.
Yeah, so again, believe it or not, like I said, the sugar, the sweets, flour products, processed foods, caffeine, chocolate may be in some people an aggravator, depending. See, sometimes the acidic foods can set people off, sometimes not. So you can really kind of gauge if things like tomatoes or grapefruit or those things make it worse. Obviously, don't eat those, but it's not a definite, oh no, you shouldn't eat those.
All right, as a kidney stone sufferer, severe at times,
right? I've had
a bad history of them.
Right.
All right, so the first thing they did was test whether or not it was acidic or calcium based.
Well, that has to do with the stone, whether it's a uric acid stone, a calcium oxalate stone, because it has to depend with the physiology of your kidneys, and if you're over-excreting one thing over another, that's a different story.
Okay.
But what people have people a lot of times are hearing now, oh, we need to eat an alkalinizing diet because when the body is acidic, it's complicated how the urine being acidic and the body acidic. A lot of those extra acids are being secreted in the urine. But to make the body more alkaline so that there's less inflammation, you actually need a healthy amount, paradoxically, of stomach acid. So people who don't have enough stomach acid, their body is actually going to be more acidic. How can my body be acidic if I'm not making enough acid? It has to do with stimulation of the pancreas. But a healthy amount of stomach acid actually helps the body become more alkaline and less prone to inflammation.
Very interesting. All right, now, is a gallstone a result of reflux or a cause of reflux?
Neither.
Okay.
It is a common result of the same underlying problem, which can be low acid and food allergies.
Okay.
So one does not cause the other, but they are both causes of the same underlying problems typically.
Can diet correct the gallstone problem?
To not correct it can keep it from being symptomatic. So people who know, fats will stimulate the gallbladder. Once you have the stones, it's kind of hard. But typically it can help it become less symptomatic, but we're not really good. Dissolving the stones has not worked well over time, so they just don't do it.
All right, so give us a recap here, Dr. Klein, because the Tums type products are flying off the shelves.
Right.
And they seem to give a temporary relief, and therefore they think...
That's exactly what they're for, occasional temporary relief. If you're having more regular symptoms, that's when people are taking more of the acid blockers. But that's the problem. If you're having a more regular problem, number one, if you can't survive without the acid blockers, then that means you're in this low stomach mucus, low acid problem, and you need the acid blockers to protect you. Somebody who just has frequent heartburn may actually try to use apple cider vinegar or this betaine hydrochloride supplement and see if it gets better. If it gets better, then their problem was just low acid, and that helps. You take the betaine with each meal. If it makes it worse, then again, they're in this low acid, low mucus problem. That takes healing of the stomach lining with herbal things and diet over time, so that then over a number of months, then people can either tolerate their own acid better and they do fine, or they can tolerate one of these, more apple cider vinegar or acidic supplements.
All right, let's see if we can squeeze in more call. Casey, are you there?
Here.
All right, you have a question about silent reflux. What is that?
I do. I have been told that I have silent reflux, and
right.
What happens to me is I don't get any heartburn. I don't have any bad taste of anything acidic in my throat. I just get kind of a tight, blocked feeling in my throat.
Right. You're having spasm. Right.
Yeah, and I have had the belching and all that fun stuff, and I'm gluten-free. I tried that.
Right.
But I am on Prilosec, and every time I try to go off of it, I don't have great success. So I'm wondering if that also is a not enough acid situation.
It is. It can be. But it's also, in your case, probably also that insufficient stomach mucus problem.
Okay,
so you would need a good naturopathic program of restoring and healing the stomach lining with these demulcent, what are called demulcent herbs of slippery elm, marshmallow root, aloe, cat's claw. And you'd need an aggressive program with that in addition to the diet over time to then see if you could be weaned off the Prilosec. Usually people just can't stop. Usually what I'll do, depending on what dose they're on, we go to a lower dose or we go into every other day dose, and over time see if we can acclimate the stomach to that. But yeah, you'd need a more aggressive program.
And do you feel like the HCl would be beneficial?
No, because you're already telling me you can't tolerate acid.
Right.
Because you can't go without the Prilosec. So no, that'll only make it worse.
Make it worse for me.
Right.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you.
Okay.
All right, there you go. Thank you. Well, this is very interesting because what I'm also hearing you say is that the bottom line is that the stomach lining needs to be healed.
Much of the time.
And that's a process. It's not an overnight thing. There's no pill for it.
No, because it's something that developed over years and years and years.
Okay. And you usually start by, how do you treat that? I mean, I know you treat it with very herbs, but do you do a blood test to find out how damaged it is?
No, you do the blood test to look for the H. pylori bacteria that causes gastritis and ulcers. Although it's still, in my view, not the bacteria's fault. The bacteria is, again, taking advantage of a stomach lining that allows it to invade more easily. But sometimes you have to treat that bacteria, and there are naturopathic and pharmaceutical ways to do it. That's the only thing you'll find in a blood test. The rest of it is the person's presentation. What they're telling you tells you what's going on, and that's when we need to use an aggressive program of diet, supplements, and I also occasionally, now that's the other thing, there is a connection that I forgot when you mentioned. Some people, if they have kind of what we would call toxic bile, and it can be toxic from environmental toxins, it can be toxic from toxic anger, is what I'll get into. And I have this some homeopathics from Germany that help with that bile issue, because yeah, that's one of the things that happen is that toxic bile is refluxing into the stomach. The bile is helping to dissolve the stomach mucus lining, and but it's actually a gallbladder bile problem. So I forgot that when you mentioned it. But that, when all these other things haven't worked for patients, the naturopathic, the herbs and all that, I'll use this homeopathic for toxic bile.
All right, we got to have you, but I want to do a program that I'm hearing you say that stress, anger.
Oh yeah, I can tell you, I have both personal and professional stories on that one. On anger and gallbladder.
Okay, so it's time to bring the spirit into the equation.
Yeah, absolutely, because that, not always, but that can be a part of the problem. I have one particular patient story that we can tell.
Well, listen, any last minute Thanksgiving we shouldn't do? Or call you on Friday.
Be smart. I tell people, okay, look, if anybody who's got a problem, okay, that we know it's the sugars and all that, all right, just pick one of the starches and pick your favorite one.
All right,
don't do all the potatoes and the stuffing and the dessert and all of it, and then blame it on the tryptophan and the turkey when you pass out at 8 o'clock.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
You're here from here. All right, VentanaWellness.com. VentanaWellness.com. Dr. Joel Klein. Thanks, buddy.
You bet.
All right,
My pleasure.
See you. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Welcome back. Well, what a delight to have with us one of our favorite people, and that is Laurie Cardoza-Moore. She's the president and founder of Proclaiming Justice to the Nation, and her Emmy Award-winning Israel Indivisible is now making some headways and some really rippling across the screens and really causing quite the stir, and we want to talk to her about that. Laurie, good to see you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Perry. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you as well.
Well, congratulations on some Emmys. Tell us about it.
Well, yeah, we're excited. We were just nominated for 2 Emmys with the official Emmy Award. And of course, we'll find out January 31st, but it just further illustrates the quality and the content of our award-winning programs. And of course, as you know, Perry, this documentary, Israel Indivisible, The Case for the Ancient Homeland, that was nominated for these 2 Emmys, has been seen by over 500 million people in over 200 countries this year alone, since February, since our release at the NRB in February in Nashville. So we're excited because this message, of course, is so critically important, especially with the recent slaughter in Jerusalem. It's very disturbing to see what's happened in the Middle East, and what's happening continues to unfold. In fact, I just got a news feed across the wire that stated that there was another vehicular attack, and I don't have all the details about that right now in Jerusalem. But unfortunately, this issue is not going away. And as Americans, as American Christians, it's so critically important that we challenge our government to take a stand relative to standing with Israel and protecting them against the terrorists who reside in Israel.
Well, so powerfully said. And I want you to continue to give us a little bit of an Israel update. I noticed these recent bombings and especially what happened there at the temple. But you know, we are hearing this morning that Chuck Hagel may be out as Secretary of Defense because he wants to deal with terrorism and the president doesn't. I mean, this is earth-shaking news. I don't know what this may mean to Israel.
Absolutely, and I haven't gotten all the details yet about that. I just heard also that he's resigning, stepping down. And I find it interesting, you know, Chuck, we were not supportive, and you may remember we put out several press releases condemning Hagel's nomination. And unfortunately, he was put into this position, and we see a lapse of judgment as to how to deal with these issues, this terrorist threat. And of course, if Hagel's saying it's because of the administration, it'll be interesting to see where the truth comes out, because we never felt that Hagel was going to be a reliable source or reliable leader for the position that he held.
Well, we'll have to see. They're saying he's being forced out. At least that's some of the reports we're getting this morning. And I don't know if this could actually be even worse for Israel if they could put a more liberal Secretary of Defense in there.
Well, one thing is for sure. This administration is pro-Muslim Brotherhood. They're pro-Palestinian. If you look at the statement that Obama put out last week with regards to the response of the attacks on the synagogue in Jerusalem and calling for restraint on both sides. I'm sorry, but it's not the Israelis who are calling for jihad to be launched against their Palestinian counterparts. If we look at what's happened over the course of the last several weeks, even since the war back during the summer in Gaza, Abu Mazen or Mahmoud Abbas has been calling for these attacks or this incitement against Israelis. And of course, they're doing it to the silence of this administration. There's been no condemnation about this. And so, of course, we have been calling on our Congress to cut the funding from the Palestinians. If there's ever a reason why we should do it, the line has been drawn in the sand. And it's time for us as Americans to say, you know what? This is not acceptable. This administration's policies do not reflect our own. They don't reflect the values of American citizens. We are waging a war on globally against Islamic radical terrorism. And unless we as Christians stand up and hold these leaders accountable, there is no hope for this country, because the secular world, most of Americans are oblivious to what's going on. This is a holy war. We see it happening in our schools. We're watching it unfold in the Middle East. And of course, we're under threat here in the United States.
Well, powerfully said. Let us not forget that 3 of those that were killed in that slaughter were Americans. And I was surprised to see the president mention them secondarily, not primarily, in his response. I was just overwhelmed with it. I couldn't believe it. Wait a minute, we got 3 Americans there. It was like, oh yeah, 4 people died.
No, and you know, it's amazing because it's just Jews after all, Perry.
Yeah.
You know, we should expect this out of the Middle East. I was just at the United Nations 5 days before the attack, and I was invited to participate as a member, as a special envoy for the World Council of Independent Christian Churches, to discuss the attacks and the persecution against religious minorities in the Middle East. Ironically, all of the panelists that were there never address the issue of the rise of global genocidal anti-Semitism against Jews. Of course, we talked about the Christian persecution, which we're seeing. We talked about Muslim persecution. We talked about Buddhists and the Yazidis. But at the end of the discussion, after the panelists were finished, of course, I raised the issue, why weren't the Jews mentioned? Because we do see a rise of global genocidal anti-Semitism. And of course, we heard the same lame excuses that, you know, Israel, that the Jews are having to deal with this issue because of their own government's policies. Of course, we're going to draw moral equivalence to the attacks. It's okay for Palestinians or Muslims to attack Israelis and Jews because they're occupying, according to their narrative, land that belongs to the Palestinians. And Perry, of course, we know the land was given to Israel. It was given for Israel. And unfortunately, because we are not speaking up, we're not educated enough, we're not informed, we're not impassioned about this. And Perry, Israel's battle is our battle. If they're going to attack the Jews, they're going to attack the Christians. And unfortunately, you know, we fail to remember that the Islamic radicals always lump us together, the Saturday people and the Sunday people, the great Satan and the little Satan, the pigs and the apes. This is our war. And I was just reading in the book of Deborah this morning how she called for the curse of Meroz because they stood by and they didn't come to the aid of God's people when God was annihilating them, when he was waging war against them. It's an important reminder, Perry, for us as Christians that we are going to be held responsible at this time for what we did or what we didn't do, especially for our Jewish brethren and especially for his covenant.
Before we take a break, when we come back, we're going to talk about textbooks. But before we do that, on this same subject here, Laurie, it appears that the anti-Semitism in the world is rising, and now even among Christians with this thing called replacement theology. And I get a lot of emails and I'm going, man alive, are we losing our minds? What's going on here? What's your thoughts?
My thoughts is that we're not teaching the Word of God to our congregants. We're bypassing the narrative and we're bypassing the Old Testament and we're going right to the New Testament. And too often, these pastors who are teaching and preaching from their pulpits only focus on the New Testament. But if we go back to the book of Acts and we read chapter 15, when the new believers were coming into the faith, when they were converting, they were in the synagogues hearing the Torah of Moses preached every Shabbat. And I say to my Christian brethren, if it was good enough to teach back then for the early believers, even James, Jesus's brother, was saying that Moses was preached in the synagogue every Shabbat. So all these new converts who were coming in, they would sit there, they listened to the Septuagint being preached, and they would know how to live their lives, how to live holy lives. And unfortunately, we don't do that anymore. And until we go back to the foundation, the first 5 books of Moses are the foundation of our faith. Everything in there is encapsulated about God's covenant and his promise. And that includes the promise that was made with Jesus Christ as our Messiah to bring us and graft us into the Commonwealth of Israel.
Beautifully said. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Laurie Cardoza-Moore with us. By the way, pjtn.org is an incredible resource, and that's her website, pjtn.org, and you can get so much information there. She's also a hawk when it comes to what is or is not in textbooks. We're going to talk to her about that when we come back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Welcome back, and our special guest today is Laurie Cardoza-Moore, one of our favorite people to have on Focus Today, and her website, pjtn.org, is an incredible resource. And let me encourage you to go there, take advantage of what she makes available there, and to support her ministry, pjtn.org. One of the things Laurie does, in addition to keep an eye on what's going on in Israel, is what's going on with the textbooks around the country. And it somewhat plays into what's going on with some of the pulpits around the country. The anti-Semitism is on a rise even in the textbooks, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, this narrative is being promoted. A lot of what we see on the evening news and the frustration that you and I feel, Perry, when we look at what's being propagated to audiences around the country is also being communicated to our children in our textbooks. Our children are now officially guinea pigs for this globalist agenda. And of course, we know that the globalists are not pro-Western. They're not pro-Israel. They're not pro-America. And unfortunately, back in 2012, it was brought to our attention. One of the members of our organization contacted me because of a textbook, because of an anti-Semitic quote in a textbook that was promoting terrorist attacks against Israeli government or Israeli citizens because of their the war that Palestinians are waging against Israeli government policies and army actions. And of course, we called out the local school board, and the story ended up going national, as you know. Fox News picked it up. We had Washington Times run a story. We did an interview on BBC. Al Jazeera did a story. But it was showing, because as we started to dig into just this one quote, we started finding anti-Judeo-Christian rhetoric in the textbooks. We found anti-American rhetoric in the textbooks, pro-Islamists. In fact, one of the most recent instructional materials that we have found in Tennessee that was approved to be used, there is no trademark, there's no copyright on this 34-page PowerPoint. However, there are 5 slides that are attributed to CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. And of course, we all know, or maybe 2007, the Department of Justice listed CARE as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist fundraising operation in the United States of America. And of course, now somebody has approved to use CARE materials to educate our children in the United States, wow, which is absolutely appalling. CARE is tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. They're tied to Hamas. This is unacceptable, Perry. And we're hearing from parents all over the country as a result of that story going nationwide. We've been contacted from even parents in Oregon, in your state, who are contacting us and letting us know that they're concerned about what's being taught to their children. We've been speaking in Florida. We've been to Massachusetts. We're going to Michigan. We're going to New York to speak, and of course throughout the state of Tennessee. And I'm telling you, there's one thing that upsets parents is when they find out that their children are being used as guinea pigs for this type of propaganda. it is causing the parents to rise up. And I think this is going to be the way that we take on this battle. When we start exposing what our children are being indoctrinated with, parents are going to rise up and say, not on my watch.
Okay, so what recourse do parents have? Do they go to the school board? What do they do?
Great question, Perry. What parents need to do first and foremost is they've got to get their children to bring their history, social studies, geography textbooks home. Then I encourage the parents to go to our website at pjtn.org. There's a whole page dedicated to the Education Initiative. It's being updated every week as we find more stories, more testimonies, as we're involved in more projects to expose this insidious agenda in our nation's schools. But first, parents have to find the information in their children's textbooks. Then they need to go and meet with the teacher, with the principal. There's a whole process that each school district has in reviewing curriculum and textbooks, and then asking for those textbooks and those instructional materials to be removed. If you don't get a satisfactory answer, we want to be able to assist these communities, and that's what we're providing, is assistance on how to go about doing that and how to mobilize your community in order to make that happen. It will work if parents will start pushing back. And you don't have to have experience in doing this. All you have to do is just read the textbook. We'll help you through it.
You know, what's so interesting about this is that people don't believe that this kind of stuff is going on. And when these things reach textbook form, where the textbook is distributed to the student, that had to go through some kind of a committee, and they gave the nod too, right?
Absolutely. Well, here in Tennessee, what we found was the Tennessee Textbook Commission were the ones who approved the textbooks and the instructional materials that have been used, that we found in Tennessee.
Wow.
And unfortunately, last November, we found more textbooks and most recently more instructional materials that are tied to Common Core. And that's a key thing, because we keep hearing about Common Core and how it's not about curriculum, it's not about textbooks. Perry, even Bill Gates, who is behind the Common Core with Pearson Publishers, even Bill Gates admitted that once the standards are established and the testing is established, the curriculum, i.e. textbooks and instructional materials, will fall in line as well. We have always said that what is being communicated to our children in their textbooks is tied to Common Core. And of course, Pearson, who has the monopoly on education, and parents need to be aware of this, Pearson Publishers is not an American-based textbook publishing company.
Wow.
They're based in Great Britain. The Libyan government owns 26 million shares of Pearson stock. Their mission statement on their website is to change the way America thinks. Well, this is a publishing company that sells textbooks to school districts around the world. Why does their mission statement say that their mission is to change the way America thinks? Why not the way the Palestinian kids think? Because they're being indoctrinated with anti-Israel, anti-American propaganda. Oh no, it's part of a whole globalist agenda. And that's why we as Americans, as parents, if we do not stop this in its tracks right now, we will lose this country. Hitler knew that all you got to do is he wanted the youth. He knew that if he could get the youth, he could change the future direction of the country of Germany. We as parents in the United States of America have got to speak out and say no more.
Unbelievable. All right, now, well, let me ask you this. Any idea how much is being taught of U.S. history these days?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, Perry, because what we're seeing in our U.S. history textbooks is revisionist history. We're not teaching, for example, when we teach about communism and socialism and Marxism, we're just teaching about a different form of government. When you and I went to school, we learned that communism was not good, that communism oppresses people, that it doesn't allow people freedom. But now our children are just being taught, oh, it's just another form of government, much like our republic is a form of government. So is communism. How convenient is that?
All right, one of the questions that comes out of this, if we don't stop this dead in its tracks and it creates the norm, can you imagine the pressure that's going to put on Christian schools and Christian universities?
Absolutely. In fact, we know that Christian schools and homeschools, people who homeschool their children, are going to be affected. What's going to happen is these children will not be able to get accepted into the universities because all of the testing in order to qualify to be accepted into a university is all going to be based on what Pearson is producing. And if we decide to use different instructional materials, different textbooks than what is the norm, our children are going to be singled out. And of course, eventually, they're going to come after the Christian schools and they're going to come after the homeschoolers because they want everybody indoctrinated. And this is very scary, Perry. I hope that people, your listeners, are paying attention to what's happening in your own community. There is a strategy to win it, and that is the Nehemiah principle. And we've got to go to parents in every county, in every state, and address this issue, to look at the textbooks, to look at the instructional materials, to get rid of Pearson published textbooks, and go to your state legislature. Once you expose this rhetoric in these textbooks on the local level, then you need to go to your state legislature, and you need to find your senators and your state representatives who will back you up on this and will look at the laws that have been passed in your state, in specific states across the country, to make sure that we have the support that we need.
Laurie, before I run out of time, is there a specific age group that's being targeted more than another?
No. Unfortunately, it's middle school and it's high school, but we're even seeing our children in elementary school as well.
All right. Well, let me encourage you to go to Laurie's website, PJTN, and that's .org, PJTN.org, Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. And you can get all that information there, and you can support it there, not only on Israel, but all the information you may need about reviewing textbooks in your area. This is amazing, Laurie. It just seems like it's just something all over the place. But if we lose the minds of our children, we've lost everything.
You know, we've been given an opportunity, Perry. God brought us into the world at this time. It wasn't 500 years ago, it wasn't 1,000 years ago. It's now. And we're all going to have to stand before him one day and give an account for what we did with our lives. Are we going to allow those veterans and people who gave their lives in the military, who fought for our freedoms, are we going to allow their deaths to be in vain? Are we going to squander what they fought for? Or are we as Christians going to stand up? In fact, I had a gentleman when I spoke in Boston contacted me. He's a reservist lieutenant colonel, and he said to tell every audience you speak to that the war with radical Islam, they will never take us on militarily because they can't win. But what we're doing right now at PJTN with the textbooks is on their battlefield. He said everybody who signs up to join your efforts is part of the soldiers, part of the new soldiers, the new foot soldiers on their battlefield.
Wow.
And it's so critically important that Americans understand this is our war. It is for such a time as this.
Wow. Okay, well, go and sign up. Join the Army. PJTN.org is the website, PJTN.org. Well, congratulations again for your Emmy nominations. We'll see how that all plays out towards the end of January. And the film is just impacting. Are you looking at a sequel to the film?
You know, it's interesting because we get all kinds of feedback about what needs to be addressed next from all of our audience. Every audience that we've had, both Jewish and Christian, are absolutely blown away by it. So we are looking at some other projects. One of the things that I want to expand on is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. It kind of ties in the whole replacement theology that you talked about earlier in the program. And this is an important component of this issue. People have to understand what is happening and why we as Christians, the largest number of people on the planet, have a responsibility to speak up.
Thanks, Laurie. You're a delight and an inspiration. Keep up the good work. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family and your staff. We love you and look forward to having you back soon.
We love you too, you guys, Perry, and thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you and all of your families as well. We're honored to be able to be partnered with theDove.
All right.
Keep up.
Blessings to you too. All right. PJTN.org. Go there, okay? All right. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.